I always thought if death came knocking, it would be quiet. A whisper. A fading breath. But mine came in a manila envelope, tucked beneath a stack of laundry by my granddaughter, Marie. It had my name on it, written in her delicate script, "Grandma, please open when you're alone." I wish I hadn't listened. The paper inside was creased but crisp, the kind you don't expect to carry bad news. It was a lab report, blood work, scans, and a red-inked diagnosis at the bottom: advanced stage lymphoma. Palliative care recommended. I sat on the edge of my bed for what felt like an hour, rereading those words until the black ink smudged under my tears. I didn't hear the birds outside or the washing machine chugging. All I could hear was my pulse in my ears and the sound of my grandchildren laughing downstairs. Jack and Marie, 17, twins, though you'd never guess from their personalities. Jack was more brooding lately, falling in with kids who didn't understand boundaries or consequences. Marie had become secretive, always clutching her phone, whispering with her friends in hushed, suspicious tones. They were 10 when they came to live with me, smudged faces, wide eyes, and missing their parents who had to work overseas. We were close once. But ever since their 16th birthday, something had changed. Doors were slammed more than they were opened. They started skipping dinner, hiding receipts, and pretending to go to school when I knew they weren't. But I never thought they would lie about this. When I brought the envelope downstairs and asked where it had come from, Marie didn't even blink. The doctor's office. They sent it to me by mistake, since I was the emergency contact on file. "I'm sorry, Grandma. We didn't know how to tell you." Jack just looked at the floor, avoiding eye contact. I thought it was guilt. I thought they were struggling to cope with my terminal diagnosis. I never imagined it was because they had forged it. "We've already looked into a care center," Marie said, gently placing a hand on mine. "It's one of the best. You'll have private care, and," her voice broke, theatrically, "you won't be alone." I didn't fight them. I was too shaken. The betrayal hadn't bloomed yet. I was still in the dark, wrapped in grief. 3 days later, we were driving to what they called a healing retreat. I left behind my rose garden, my reading chair, and the small framed photo of their parents by the fireplace. The facility was cold and efficient. The staff kind, but impersonal. It didn't feel like a place of healing, it felt like waiting. And Jack and Marie? They didn't even stay the full hour. "We'll be back tomorrow, Grandma," Jack said as he hugged me. They never returned. Instead, 2 days later, I got a voicemail from my neighbor, Mrs. Jennings. "Lauren, I didn't know you were moving. The twins said you were dying and needed full-time hospice. But I saw a for rent sign on your lawn. Call me when you can." That's when the sickness I'd been feeling finally settled, not in my bones, but in my gut. I called the clinic I'd always used for years. The nurse sounded confused. "We don't have any record of recent labs or scans for you, Mrs. Harding." "Are you sure they came from us?" I wasn't. I had never actually looked at the letterhead. So I walked to a different clinic. One they didn't know about. One that wouldn't have my files. I sat in a sterile waiting room, heartbeat loud in my ears, convinced I'd find out that I was, in fact, dying. But I wasn't. The tests came back 3 days later. Every marker was within range. My heart was strong. My blood was clean. I wasn't dying. I was healthy. Which meant two people had gone to great lengths to make me believe I was dying. And those 2 people had once called me Grandma. I couldn't sleep the night the truth came in. I sat in my modest room at the facility, the printout of my clean bill of health crumpled in my hand, eyes burning as I stared at the ceiling. Healthy. Not even borderline anything. Not cancer. Not dying. Just betrayed. They had forged a terminal diagnosis to get rid of me. That realization kept knocking the wind out of me like waves slamming into a broken seawall. For weeks, I'd mourned myself, grieved a death sentence they fabricated, cried over the thought of leaving them behind. I'd even written goodbye letters I never planned to send. I kept asking myself why. Why would Jack and Marie do this? Was I too strict? Too old-fashioned? Had I made them feel trapped or smothered? But no, this wasn't about emotions. This was about money. A neighbor confirmed what I'd already suspected. Jack and Marie had rented out my house. Two strangers were already living there, suitcases unpacked in the bedroom I'd slept in for 30 years. And my grandchildren? They'd moved into their parents' apartment, claiming it was closer to their new school. They didn't just want me out. They wanted my home, my pension, my silence. That's when I stopped grieving and started thinking. I returned to the facility, smiled at the nurses, thanked them for the bland chicken and quiet afternoons. And then I began collecting. I knew I couldn't confront Jack and Marie yet, not without proof. Not without making them confess in a way they couldn't wiggle out of. So I asked the nurse for permission to install a security camera to keep an eye on my things. She agreed it wasn't against the rules. The camera I ordered was small, discreet, and sent footage directly to my email. I placed it near my old jewelry box, which they had packed for me in haste. I had a feeling they'd be back to poke through it. I was right. For days later, while I pretended to nap, Jack came to visit. It was just him this time, all faux charm and cheap cologne. He brought a plastic container of grapes I hadn't asked for and poked around my room for 20 minutes while I watched through my phone screen from the corner of my blanket. He opened the jewelry box. He took the gold pendant my late husband had given me on our anniversary. He pocketed 2 rings and a pair of earrings, then smiled at me and said, "We're always thinking of you, Grandma." I smiled too, because now I had footage. That night, I called my friend Linda from church. She'd moved away years ago, but she still had her IT connections. I told her everything. "Lauren," she said slowly, "this is criminal. You need to speak with your son." But I wasn't ready, not yet. I needed more. So I had Linda help me set up voice-activated recording devices in my room, just in case they came back and slipped again. And soon enough they did. This time it was Marie. She thought I was asleep, breathing slow, back turned. She answered a call on speaker. "Yeah, we've got it all worked out," she whispered. "She thinks she's dying. Probably crying herself to sleep every night. The house is rented already. We're clearing almost $2,000 a month." A pause. Laughter. "Jack's going to try and sell her old silver set too, if we can figure out where she stashed it." My heart beat so loudly I thought it would give me away. But I didn't move. I didn't even breathe too deeply. I had everything I needed now. Video. Audio. A motive. A timeline. My finger hovered over my phone contact list. It was time to call their father. Calling my son was the hardest part. I'd spent years shielding him from anything unpleasant when it came to the kids. He and his wife were working themselves ragged overseas, trying to build a future for Jack and Marie. They sent money every month. They believed the twins were thriving. They had no idea what their children had become. The video files and audio clips were neatly organized in a hidden folder on my phone. I listened to the recordings 3 times before I sent them. Marie's voice, smug and satisfied. Jack's sticky-fingered visit to my room. The laughter. The plans. The lies. I stared at my contact list for 10 minutes before pressing call. When he answered, his voice was like a balm I hadn't realized I needed. "Mom? Everything okay?" I wanted to lie. To say yes. To protect him, even now. But I couldn't. "I need you to listen to something, David. I'm sending you some files. Please, just listen. Then call me back." He didn't argue. He knew my tone. It took 27 minutes. I stared at the screen the entire time, watching the delivered mark, then the silence, then typing, then nothing again. When the phone finally rang again, he didn't say hello. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, "They told me you were dying." "I know. They made me believe they were taking care of you." "I know." He exhaled hard, one of those ragged, helpless sounds you only make when something inside you breaks. "I trusted them, Mom. I raised them better than this." "No, you didn't raise them," I said gently. "I did. You trusted me to do it." That silenced him. "Then, what do you want me to do?" I didn't hesitate. They need to be held accountable. Not yelled at. Not scolded. I want them to feel the weight of this. I want them to understand the gravity of what they did. David was quiet for a long time. Then he said the words I hadn't expected but desperately needed. "I'm coming home." 3 days later, David stood in the very living room Jack and Marie had tried to erase me from. I sat beside him as they entered, smirking at first until they saw him. Their father. Standing beside the woman they tried to push out like she was trash. "Dad?" Jack asked, visibly paling. "What are you doing here?" "Sit," David said. His voice wasn't raised. That made it worse. Marie opened her mouth to speak, but he held up a hand. "Sit." They did. Slowly. Like they sensed that for the first time in their lives, the game was over. He turned the TV on. Pressed play. Their own voices filled the room, laughing about my condition, about the rented house, about the junk they planned to sell. By the time the clip ended, neither of them could speak. "You lied to your grandmother," David said, voice cold. "You exploited her trust. You tried to throw her away." "Dad," Marie began, face twisted with panic. "No, you don't get to talk now." He pointed at the screen. "You've already said enough." I looked at them, really looked, and saw not the children I raised, but something else. Something selfish. Twisted. "You're not going to jail," I said. "But you're going to be punished." David nodded. "There's a camp. 4 teens like you. High discipline. Remote. No phones. No friends. And no escape." Jack stood up, panic in his eyes. "You can't make us." "Oh, but we can," David said. "You're minors. And we're still your legal guardians. Your school records, your bank accounts, even your passports? All in our hands." Marie looked at me like I was a stranger. "You set us up." "No," I replied. "You set yourselves up. I just gave you the stage." And as they sat there, realizing this wasn't a threat but a sentence, I saw fear bloom in their eyes for the first time. It was only the beginning. Jack cried first. Not a loud sob, not the tantrum of a boy trying to get out of trouble, but a low, pitiful sound like something was unraveling inside him. His shoulders hunched, his eyes wet, his mouth open but empty of words. Marie stayed quiet. She always was the strategist. Her eyes started between her father and me, calculating, recalculating, trying to determine if there was any move left to play. There wasn't. "You can't send us away," she finally whispered. "We're not criminals." I stood slowly. "No, you're not criminals. Not yet. But what you did, that was psychological manipulation. Theft. Fraud. If I had gone to the police instead of your father, you'd be facing charges. You should be thankful I still believe you're worth saving." David didn't soften. "The camp isn't a suggestion. You'll go for 6 months. No visitors. No early releases. When you come back, if you've changed, we'll talk about trust." Marie looked at him like he'd hit her. 6 months? You're throwing away our future over one mistake. One mistake. David's voice cracked. You lied about your grandmother dying. You stole from her. You evicted her from her own home. That's not a mistake. That's character. Marie's bravado collapsed in a heartbeat. I didn't mean to. Yes, I cut in, you did. And what's worse, you thought I wouldn't survive it. That I'd just fade away quietly so you could enjoy the spoils. Jack looked up at me then, his face a mess of regret. Grandma, we didn't think it would go that far. We just wanted more freedom. You had freedom, I snapped. You had love. You had stability. And you threw it away because you wanted money. David picked up a folder from the coffee table and dropped it in front of them. Here's the camp contract. Transportation's already arranged. You leave Monday. Marie stood up abruptly, tears slipping down her cheeks. I won't go. You will, he replied. Or the police will get involved. I've already spoken to them. They've seen the footage. You'll either get help or consequences. Jack didn't move. He looked hollowed out. His voice came small and shaking. Will you ever forgive us? I looked at him, and for a moment, I saw the boy who used to bring me dandelions and ask me to read him stories at bedtime. Then I blinked and saw who he had become. Forgiveness takes time, I said. Respect takes longer. Marie collapsed onto the couch. She didn't argue again. That night, after David left to finalize the arrangements, I walked through the house I thought I'd never see again. Everything was untouched, but different. The photo frames on the mantel. The china in the cabinet. The old quilt on the back of the couch. I had buried myself before anyone else had the chance. But I was alive. I had power. And I had a purpose now. They thought I was weak. They thought I wouldn't fight back. But they had no idea what a grandmother was capable of when her heart was broken. The morning they left, the air was unusually still. No birdsong. No wind. Just the low hum of the van engine outside, idling like a silent countdown. Jack and Marie stood in the hallway, each clutching a single duffel bag packed under supervision. No phones. No electronics. No cash. Just the basics, enough to strip them of distractions and remind them what it meant to start over. Marie had cried through the night. I could hear her from my bedroom, the muffled sobs, the creak of the floorboards as she paced. But by morning, her face was carved from ice. She wouldn't give me the satisfaction of another tear. Jack didn't say a word. Not at breakfast, not during the last-minute bag check, not as David signed the final consent forms for the facility. They looked like strangers now, distant and quiet, like the kids I raised were gone and had been replaced by shadows of themselves. I stood at the front door, arms crossed, watching them. David approached, his jaw tight with tension. The counselor said not to make a scene. Just keep it calm. I nodded. They've had enough drama. This isn't punishment. It's discipline. Marie turned back once, just before stepping into the van. She locked eyes with me, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw the tiniest flicker of shame. I didn't hate you, Grandma, she whispered. I just didn't want to be stuck. Like you. I didn't flinch. I wasn't stuck, I said softly. I was loyal. Then she was gone. The van door slammed. The vehicle pulled away slowly, tires crackling over gravel. And just like that, the house was silent again. But it was a different kind of silence. Not the kind left behind by betrayal. A peaceful kind. Later that afternoon, I went to the backyard and sat by the rose bushes Harold had planted. They were in full bloom, vibrant reds and pinks, soft yellows. The ones Jack used to water when he was small. The ones Marie used to snip for the kitchen vase. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat there, letting the sun warm my face, my hands folded in my lap. They were gone. And I was still here. Alive. Whole. Stronger than I had ever been. The first letter arrived 2 weeks into their stay. It came in a plain envelope, no return address, just a stamp and my name written in Jack's familiar scrawl. I opened it with trembling hands, not sure if I was ready to hear what he had to say. I expected anger, denial, blame. But instead, I found 5 words scrawled across a single sheet of lined paper. You were right about everything. No salutation. No signature. Just that. I folded it carefully and placed it in my bedside drawer. A week later came Marie's letter. Hers was longer. Neatly written. No doodles in the margins like she used to draw as a child. Just tight, structured lines, words chosen like bricks, building walls around a very different tone than Jack's. Dear Grandma, I hated you. Not for who you were, but for what I thought you represented. Rules. Routine. Safety. I thought that made you weak. But it turns out it made you strong. This place, it's not hell, but it's close. And for the first time in my life, I'm having to really think about why I did what I did. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I forgive myself yet. But I wanted you to know I hear your silence. And I know I earned it. I reread her words 3 times. Then I folded the letter and tucked it beside Jack's in the same drawer. I didn't write back. Not yet. Not because I didn't care, but because words were cheap. And trust wasn't built with ink. Instead, I went to the attic. I opened the dusty trunk at the far end, the one filled with old photographs, school awards, their baby clothes, the tiny drawings they used to tape to the fridge. I pulled out 2 framed photos, one of Jack at age 8, smiling with a missing tooth, and one of Marie holding a soccer trophy, grinning like the world was hers. I set them both on the mantel. Then I took a deep breath and started something I'd been avoiding for years. I began reclaiming the house. Room by room, I scrubbed the walls, donated the clutter, repainted the hallway. I replaced the locks. I updated the security system. I planted more roses. Because one day, they would come home. And when they did, they wouldn't find the fragile old woman they tried to bury. They would find the grandmother they underestimated, stronger than ever, house intact, garden blooming. A woman who knew the truth, demanded accountability, and didn't flinch from justice. It was David's idea at first. He said he'd been in touch with the camp director and was allowed one supervised parental visit midway through the program. "They're not the same kids anymore, Mom," he said on the phone. "It's working. The discipline, the labor, the rules, it's doing what we couldn't." I didn't agree to go right away. Part of me didn't want to see them, not yet. I was still healing. But curiosity, that old itch, eventually pushed me out the door and onto the winding road that led to the isolated facility 2 hours north of town. The camp didn't look like a prison. It looked like a school built into the woods. Modest cabins, gravel paths, and a small central field where a dozen teens were stacking firewood under supervision. But there was no laughter. No chatter. Just work. Marie saw me first. She was raking leaves near the chapel and froze when she looked up. Her mouth fell open, eyes wide. The rake slipped from her hand. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I simply nodded. She blinked twice and nodded back. Then she picked the rake back up and continued her work. Jack came out of the kitchen building, hair longer, frame leaner, shoulders more squared. He was wearing a stained apron and carrying a crate of potatoes. He didn't spot me until he turned toward the director's cabin, and then he froze too. But unlike Marie, he walked over. Slowly. Hesitantly. Like he expected me to turn away. "Grandma," he said. I tilted my head. "Jack. I didn't think you'd come." "I didn't think I would either." He nodded, hands in his pockets. "You look good. You look like someone who finally met consequences." He winced, but didn't look away. I deserved them. There it was. Not defiance. Not manipulation. Just plain truth. "I'm still angry," I said plainly. "I know. And I haven't forgiven you." "I didn't come here for that," he said. "I came because I didn't want to be that person anymore." For a moment, we just stood there in silence. Then I asked, "Have you been writing those letters because you meant them, or because you thought they'd get you out early?" He met my gaze squarely. "At first? Maybe a bit of both. Now? I don't care how long I'm here. I just want to be someone you can be proud of again. Someday." I nodded once and, without another word, turned and walked back to the car. Marie never came over. She watched me from a distance, hands tight around the rake handle. But I saw something in her expression, something I hadn't seen since they were children. Shame. And maybe, just maybe, hope. By the time I got back home from the camp visit, there were 2 voicemails waiting on my landline. Both from David's wife, Helena. The first one was short, clipped. "Lauren, call me back when you can. I heard about what happened with the kids." The second, left just hours later, was longer and angrier. "Lauren, I need to understand what you're doing. David told me everything. The recordings, the camp, the deception. I get that they messed up, but they're still children. You didn't just punish them. You orchestrated this whole thing like some kind of vendetta." Vendetta. That word echoed through the room like a slap. I hadn't spoken to Helena directly in months. She was always polite, but distant, the kind of woman who treated parenting like a chore and discipline like abuse. She saw the kids as victims. No matter what they did, it was always someone else's fault. I didn't call her back. Instead, I called David. He answered immediately. "Mom, I'm sorry. Helena heard about the camp during a phone call with Marie. She's upset." "Is she going to try to pull them out?" "She tried," he said. "But I already told her. They're staying the full term. I'm not backing down." I sighed and sat in the kitchen, watching the afternoon lights spill across the floor. "You're sure?" "I'm sure. And for the record, I don't think you went too far. I think if you hadn't stepped in, I would have lost them completely." We hung up soon after, but the tension lingered. That night, I received another email from Helena. Not an apology. A warning. When they get out, don't expect them to ever trust you again. You've broken something that might not heal. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had broken something. But I didn't regret it. I had protected them for too long. Covered for them. Made excuses. Let things slide. And all it taught them was that love meant permission. That family meant no consequences. Not anymore. Over the next few weeks, other family members began calling. Cousins, aunties, distant relatives from the city. Somehow the story got out, half-truths, bits of drama, whispers twisted through the grapevine. Some blamed me. Some quietly applauded me. But I didn't owe them explanations. I had the truth. And I had time. It started with a letter from the utility company. A notice about an unpaid bill for the house, my house. The one Jack and Marie had supposedly set up on automatic payment from their rental earnings. At first, I thought it was just a mistake. But then I checked the bank account they used while living with me. The joint account I had opened years ago for emergencies. It was nearly empty. The balance was under $20. I sat there, staring at the screen. It didn't make sense. David and Helena sent money monthly for the kids' needs. Their parents were generous, even while working abroad. I rarely touched those funds unless it was for school supplies or household necessities. So where had it gone? I opened the transaction history. That's when the truth hit like a hammer. Over the last 6 months, right before the diagnosis stunt, the account had been drained steadily. Hundreds here, thousands there. All marked under vague descriptions, miscellaneous services, e-commerce, transfers. Then one pattern stuck out. Frequent transfers to a private PayPal account registered under a name I didn't recognize. At first. But then I remembered, Landon. Jack's new friend from his last year of school. The one with a motorcycle and a reputation for fast cash schemes. I checked further. More payments to names I didn't know, including what looked like rentals on luxury electronics. High-end sneakers. Gaming consoles. Even tickets to a music festival 3 states away. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had stolen from the people who trusted them the most and burned it on nothing but status and vanity. I printed everything. Every transaction. Every suspicious transfer. Every charge. I highlighted the ones that matched up with dates Jack or Marie had claimed they were at school or volunteering. Then I faxed the whole file to David. He called within 10 minutes. Mom, what is this? Proof, I said. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't them being led astray. This was calculated. They drained their future dry just to play pretend with a bunch of losers. I'm going to freeze the remaining accounts, David muttered. And I'll press charges if I have to. I believed him. For the first time, I heard in his voice the same cold fire I'd felt that day in the care home. They'll pay it back, I said. Every cent. David didn't ask how. He knew me well enough not to. I'd protected those kids for years. Now I would protect what was left of their future by forcing them to rebuild it themselves, brick by brick. It was a quiet Sunday when the phone rang. I was sorting through old photo albums, trying to decide what to keep and what to tuck away for another year. I didn't recognize the number, but something made me answer. Mrs. Harding? This is Andrew Lyle, director of Westridge Reform Camp. I hope I'm not disturbing you. No, not at all, I said, setting aside a photo of Jack in a Halloween costume from 2nd grade. I wanted to reach out personally regarding your grandchildren. Jack and Marie. My stomach tightened. What happened? He paused, long enough to make me think it was bad news. Then he said, they're changing. I sat up straighter. Changing how? I don't want to oversell it, he continued carefully. But Jack has become something of a leader among the boys here. He's taken responsibility for kitchen shifts, he's mentoring a younger camper who came in angry and combative, and he hasn't caused a single disciplinary problem in over a month. I didn't know what to say. I had expected resistance. Manipulation. But leadership? And Marie? I asked, cautious. She's slower to open up, Andrew admitted. But she requested to speak to the camp therapist weekly. That's rare. Most of the girls avoid it. And she wrote a letter to her future self. We have them do that sometimes. Would you like to hear it? My breath caught. Please. He cleared his throat. Dear me. If you're reading this, it means you made it out of this place, and hopefully, you're not the person who walked in. Hopefully, you don't lie to people who love you. Hopefully, you don't throw away safety for attention. If Grandma's still alive, if she still talks to you, you better thank her. Not just for raising you, but for saving you. Because if she hadn't done what she did, you'd probably be in jail, or worse, still lying to yourself. The line was quiet for a while. When I finally spoke, my voice cracked. Thank you, Mr. Lau. That means more than you know. I thought you should hear it directly, he said. We get a lot of families who send their kids here hoping for miracles. Most don't get one. But your grandkids, they're trying. That night, I went to the drawer in my bedroom. I opened it and pulled out their letters. I added a new one beside them. A fresh envelope. Blank. It wasn't a letter I planned to send yet. But it was the beginning of something I didn't think I'd feel again so soon. Hope. The more the weeks passed, the more the reports from camp came in, and the more I realized, if they were coming back into my life, it was going to be on my terms. Forgiveness was not free. I scheduled a video call with David and the camp counselor, Mr. Lyle, to discuss what reintegration might look like. They've made significant progress, Mr. Lyle said, his tone measured. But they're still teenagers. Their remorse is real, but their self-control is fragile. A poor environment could undo it all. I'm not running a recovery clinic, I said bluntly. I'm a 64-year-old woman who was tricked into believing I was dying and nearly thrown into a facility like garbage. I don't need more, maybe, and let's try. I need rules. David nodded. I agree. We're not opening the doors and pretending none of this happened. So we created a list. Not suggestions. Requirements. They will not live in my house. Not yet. They'll be placed in a supervised youth housing program for 6 months after release. Structured, accountable, monitored. Mandatory therapy. Weekly sessions. Proof of attendance. No exceptions. Employment. Part-time jobs. They will begin repaying every cent taken from the joint account. No allowance. No handouts. Community service. They will volunteer weekly at the hospice center they claimed I would need. They will see firsthand what real terminal illness looks like. Restricted contact. No social media. No unmonitored internet access. Phone calls to me only on Sundays, supervised for the first month. One written letter of apology. No texting. No shortcuts. A real letter to be delivered on the day of their release. Are you sure this isn't too harsh? David asked after we finalized the document. No, I said. What they did wasn't a mistake. It was a betrayal. If they want to come back into our lives, they have to rebuild trust from the ground up. We emailed the plan to the camp and waited. The reply came 3 days later. Jack and Marie had read it. They had cried. And they had both signed the agreement. I was in the garden when the courier arrived. A plain manila envelope, no return address, but I knew immediately what it was. The letters. Marie's came first. Her handwriting was still small and neat, but this time there was no showmanship in the loops. No flair. Just raw, controlled words. Grandma, there is no excuse for what I did. I know you probably read that and think, she's only saying it because she has to. But I'm not. I've been writing and rewriting this letter in my head for months. You gave up everything to raise us. And I repaid that by trying to erase you from your own life. I convinced myself it was survival. But the truth is, I was selfish. I wanted control. I wanted to live like we were adults without earning the right. I hurt you. I see it now. I used your love as a weapon to push you away, and when you didn't break, I tried to cut deeper. But I was wrong. You didn't break. You fought back. And thank God you did. You saved us. Even when we didn't deserve saving. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm just hoping that one day, you'll trust me enough to let me make things right. I love you. And I'm sorry. I sat there in silence, the letter trembling in my hands. For the first time in over a year, I felt the weight shift from grief to something gentler. Then I opened Jack's. His handwriting was messy, emotional. Lines scratched out, rewritten, corrected again and again. Grandma, I can't believe I did what I did. Every time I think about that day in the clinic, seeing you cry, I want to go back and stop myself. But I can't. So now, all I can do is own it. I was weak. I let people influence me. I let Marie take the lead and I didn't stop her because part of me thought it would all work out, that you'd be okay, that you wouldn't really go, that maybe it was just a temporary solution. That lie became a plan. And that plan became a betrayal. You taught me better. And I failed you. I'm not asking you to treat me like a grandson right now. I'm asking you to treat me like someone trying to earn that title back. If there's a list of things I have to do to prove I've changed, then hand me that list and let me start. Please. I miss you. And I'm sorry. I read both letters twice. Then I placed them side by side on the kitchen table. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt something shift, not closure, not yet, but the first stone placed on a new path. I poured myself a cup of tea. And I smiled. Just a little. 6 months later, Jack and Marie returned to the city. Not to my home, but to a transitional youth housing center just across town. Clean, safe, closely monitored. They arrived with just the clothes on their backs and the rules I had drawn up months before. David was there to greet them. I wasn't. That was the plan. They would earn their way back, not walk back in like nothing had happened. I watched them from a distance at first. They didn't know, but I made a habit of driving by the center once a week. I saw them waiting at the bus stop in the mornings, Marie in a plain work uniform, Jack with a backpack slung over one shoulder, always looking down. They weren't living lavishly anymore. No new gadgets. No luxury sneakers. Just routine, sweat, and slow, deliberate effort. Marie got a job at a local diner, minimum wage, long hours, no tips unless earned. The manager called me 2 weeks in, asking if she had any experience. She's learning, he said. But she's respectful. Shows up early. Says, yes, sir, and thank you. That's rare these days. Jack worked at a car wash, cleaning under summer heat and freezing winter drizzle. One of the older mechanics told me, without knowing who I was, that the kid never complained, even when they made him scrub tire rims by hand for an entire week. They got guts, the man said. Like someone finally taught them how to use guilt instead of hide from it. They also began therapy. Real sessions, consistent ones. I asked David to get me their attendance logs, not the notes, just the proof. And each week, there they were. Marie, present. Jack, present. Like clockwork. But the most important part wasn't the jobs or the therapy or the structured living. It was the weekly Sunday call. Every Sunday at 6 p.m., they phoned me. At first, the conversations were stilted. Formal. Jack would recap his hours worked. Marie would mention a new book she was reading. They stuck to neutral ground. Safe subjects. But little by little, that changed. Jack asked how the garden was doing. Marie remembered my favorite tea and said she saw it on sale. They never pushed. Never asked to visit. And I didn't offer. But with each call, a wall came down one brick at a time. They were no longer the children who lied and stole. They were becoming something else. And I was becoming someone new too. Not the grandmother they remembered, but the woman who made them remember who they were. It was mid-autumn when the call came. Sunday, 6 p.m., sharp like always. Marie's voice was steadier than usual, less cautious. Hi, Grandma. How's the weather up your way? Cooler, I said, glancing out the window. The roses are fading, but they held out longer this year. I remember the yellow ones always went first, she said, like she was trying to conjure something safe. Then there was a long pause. I have a question. I braced myself. Go on. If I bought my own bus pass and showed you proof of my community service hours, would you let me visit the garden? Just to help you trim the dead blossoms before winter. I didn't respond right away. It wasn't a manipulative question. There was no pitch, no emotional bait. Just a request from a girl trying to reconnect with something she had once taken for granted. You can visit the garden, I said slowly, but you won't step foot in the house. I understand. And you'll wear gloves. And you'll bring your own tools. Mine are where I left them, and they're not yours to touch. Another pause. That's fair. And Jack doesn't come. Not yet. One at a time. I know. I didn't ask him. I almost smiled at that. The old Marie would have negotiated both of them through the front door within minutes. But this girl knew she was on probation. She was patient. Sunday afternoon, the following week, I heard the gate creak open. I stayed in the kitchen, behind the curtain, watching. She walked in slowly, clutching a reusable tote bag, hair pulled back tight. She knelt near the far rosebush, the one she used to call Sun Queen, and gently began snipping at the withered blossoms. Her movements were delicate, like she was handling something sacred. She stayed for exactly 1 hour. She never looked toward the house, never approached the porch, and when she left, she didn't even knock. That night, I found a small envelope placed carefully on the edge of the garden bench. Inside was a pressed yellow rose and a note. I didn't want to speak too soon, but thank you for letting me start again, one petal at a time. I folded the note and placed it in the same drawer as the letters. The healing wasn't finished, but something fragile had begun to bloom. It was 2 weeks after Marie's quiet visit when Jack showed up, unannounced, uninvited, and standing awkwardly at the edge of the front lawn like he didn't know whether to knock or run. I saw him through the kitchen window. He wasn't carrying flowers or a letter. Just a small cardboard box, worn at the corners, with something inside. I opened the front door, but I didn't step out. He took one careful step forward, then stopped. I'm not here to ask for anything. Then why are you here? I asked. He held up the box. I found these when I was going through some of the stuff I had stashed away at the youth center. They were yours. He extended it toward me. I still didn't move, so he bent down and placed it gently on the welcome mat. Then he stepped back 2 full paces. I sold a lot of things I shouldn't have, he said quietly. But these, I held on to. I don't know why. I think part of me knew I'd need to give them back someday. I bent down and opened the flaps of the box. Inside were 3 things I hadn't even realized were missing: my wedding ring, the brooch my mother gave me on her deathbed, and a small velvet pouch that once held the locket Harold gave me on our 40th anniversary. All of them had been tucked away in my bedroom drawer, the one Jack rummaged through when he visited me at the care home. I stared at the items, then looked back up at him. You stole these. I did, he said without flinching. I had no excuse. I was just greedy. I told myself they didn't matter to you anymore. But I was lying. To me or to yourself? Both. I picked up the locket. It was still warm from being held. Why didn't you pawn them? Because I couldn't look at them without hearing your voice. Even when I was angry. Even when I was high on the idea that we'd made it, I still couldn't let these go. I didn't thank him. Not yet. I wasn't sure I wanted to reward him for not crossing the last line. But I didn't close the door either. You can help Marie in the garden next week, I said quietly. Same rules. No tools of mine. No entry into the house. 1 hour. His eyes widened slightly. Really? 1 chance, I clarified. You use it wrong, you don't get another. He nodded. That's all I'm asking. As he walked away down the sidewalk, I looked down at the locket, turning it over in my hand. It clicked open with a soft snap, revealing the tiny photo inside, Harold holding baby Jack in one arm and Marie in the other, all crammed into a rocking chair too small for 3. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed that moment. And somehow, this version of Jack, the one who walked away without trying to push the door open, felt closer to the boy in that photo than he had in years. For months, I had kept the ordeal quiet. Not out of shame, but out of strategy. The fewer people knew what Jack and Marie had done, the less pressure they'd face from gossip. Let them carry the weight of what they did, not the burden of being a cautionary tale. But small towns love whispers. It only took 1 Sunday visit, 1 lingering glance from Mrs. Jennings next door, and 1 overly enthusiastic retelling at church for the truth to leak. By the end of the week, it was everywhere. People weren't subtle. Some offered condolences as if I'd survived an actual disease. Lauren, I had no idea you were sick. Oh wait, not sick. My goodness. Their pity was worse than silence. Others took a different approach, especially the older women from the sewing circle. Good for you, murmured Ms. Connors, pouring herself tea at the community center. It's about time kids like that learned the hard way. Lord knows they wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes with my mother. I would have sent mine to military school, another chimed in. You were kind, Lauren. Maybe too kind. But the most surprising conversation came from Thomas Ellerby, my neighbor's grumpy, retired husband who hadn't spoken more than 10 words to me in 5 years. He stood at the edge of my property as I was pruning roses one afternoon and said, "They still working those jobs?" "Yes," I replied. He nodded slowly, then looked me square in the eye. "Then maybe you didn't fail as a guardian. Maybe you just gave them the kind of love that teaches." Then he walked off, muttering something about compost. That stuck with me. I didn't need validation. but hearing it from someone who didn't owe me kindness meant something. Later that night, as I closed the garden gate, I saw Marie and Jack approaching from the sidewalk, carrying their own gardening gloves and rakes. They paused before entering, eyes scanning the house, the yard, the faces watching from nearby windows. This time, it wasn't just my judgment they were facing, it was the entire town's. And they didn't flinch. They didn't wave or smile. They just stepped inside the gate and went straight to work. Silently. Methodically. Like they knew that in a town like ours, actions spoke louder than apologies. It was early November, the last trimming session before winter would settle in and the roses would sleep beneath the frost. Jack was already there, clearing leaves by the tool shed while Marie quietly pruned the base of the Queen's Row, the stretch of golden roses she'd once named when she was just 10. I was sorting mulch by the porch steps when I saw her pause, gloves dangling from her hands. Her back straightened, and for a moment I thought she was going to speak to Jack. Instead, she turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" she said, voice careful. I nodded. "You're already doing it." She smiled faintly. "Why didn't you send us to jail?" I put down the sack of mulch. It wasn't the question I expected, but it was the one she needed answered. "Because jail would have taken you away from me completely," I said. "And I wasn't sure I'd ever get you back." She nodded slowly, eyes on the soil. "But you wanted to, didn't you? When you found out?" "Yes," I said plainly. "I wanted you both punished. I wanted you scared. I wanted you to feel what I felt when I thought I was dying alone." She winced. "I needed to feel like I still had power," I added. "Because what you two did, you didn't just lie. You made me feel disposable." Her shoulders slumped. "I know. But jail wouldn't have changed you. It would have hardened you. And it would have broken your father." She blinked quickly. "Dad still barely speaks to us." "He will," I said. "Once he believes it's not a performance." She was quiet a moment longer, then said, "I lied more than Jack did." "I know. I was the one who got the fake diagnosis printed. My friend's sister works at a temp clinic. I bribed her with cash. That caught me off guard. I had always assumed it was a team effort. But now the full weight of her leadership and the deception came to light. I didn't think you'd check," she continued. I thought you'd just fade. And the house would be ours. I didn't even consider how terrified you must have felt." I looked at her. Really looked at her. She wasn't making excuses. She was standing in her own guilt and choosing to be seen. "Guilt is only useful if it leads to change," I said. "Otherwise it's just dead weight." She looked up at me, eyes glassy. "I want to change." "Then prove it. Keep showing up." "I will," she whispered. And for the first time, I reached out and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was acknowledgement. It came as an email from the camp's post-program counselor. Jack had been offered a job. A real one. Not dishwashing or tire scrubbing. A junior apprenticeship with a local garage that worked on performance engines and custom rebuilds. It was a rare opportunity, especially for someone with his record. "They've seen his discipline and want to invest in him," the email read. If he accepts, it would mean long hours and less time for side work. But it could be a turning point. I didn't say anything to Jack. I wanted to see what he would do with the offer. 2 days later, he brought it up himself while adjusting the netting over the garden beds. "There's this apprenticeship thing," he said carefully, like he didn't want to overplay it. "It's decent. Paid. The owner said he'd even let me use the space for my GED study hours if I stick with the program." "And?" I asked, not looking up from my rosebush. I turned it down. That made me freeze. I turned slowly. "Why?" He wiped his hands on his jeans and looked at the sky like the words might fall from it. "Because it was full-time. And I haven't finished repaying the joint account. And if I take that job now, I won't have time to volunteer at the hospice center. You could have made more money. Fix things faster." He nodded. But not the right way. There it was. The difference between the old Jack and the one standing before me now. "I made a plan," he continued. 3 more months at the car wash. Finish the community service hours. Then reapply for the apprenticeship. If they still want me then, I'll know I earned it clean. I let the silence hang. Then I said, "You did the right thing." He looked relieved, but not prideful. Just steady. Marie joined him 10 minutes later, brushing dirt off her jacket. They worked side by side for another hour, not talking much. Just tending to the last of the season's flowers, each action quiet but deliberate. When they left, they didn't ask for anything. They just said goodbye and closed the gate behind them. And I stood alone on the porch, watching two shadows retreat down the sidewalk, not with resentment, but with something new. Respect. They were earning it. One decision at a time. He arrived unannounced. It had been nearly 3 months since I'd seen my son in person. He looked older. Not in years, but in weight. Not physical, emotional. The kind that settles in the eyes and bends the spine just enough to show you've been carrying too much for too long. He brought 2 things with him, a bag of groceries and a silence thicker than winter fog. We sat in the kitchen while the kettle boiled. I poured tea, handed him a cup, and waited. He didn't make me wait long. "I've been talking to their mother," he said. I kept my face unreadable. "She still thinks we went too far." "That you went too far." "Of course she did. She wants to move them back in when they turn 18. That hit harder than I expected. "Back into what?" I asked. "The house they tried to take from me? Or the one she barely visits when she's home?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stirred his tea, then set the spoon down with deliberate slowness. "They're not kids anymore. And they're going to need somewhere to land after this." "They already have that," I said firmly. "Structure. Work. Community. It's what they need, not what they want." He looked at me for a long moment. "Are you ever going to forgive them?" I took a breath before answering. "Forgiveness is earned. They're on the path. But I'll never forget what they did. Not because I'm bitter, but because forgetting means I didn't learn anything." David nodded slowly. "You know, I used to think you were too soft on them." I raised an eyebrow. "But now I think you were the only one who ever really saw them. You caught them slipping long before we did. And when it came time to act, you didn't flinch." "I flinched plenty," I said quietly. "Just not where they could see it." He chuckled, then went silent again. "What do you want from me, David?" I asked finally. "I want to know if they'll ever be welcome in your home again." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood, walked to the drawer, and pulled out the stack of letters, Jack's apologies, Marie's confessions, the locket, the photos, even their signed conditions of return. I placed them on the table between us. When that stack feels like something I can trust, not just read, I'll unlock the door. He nodded. "That's fair." Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "I gave them each a savings account," he said. "Small, restricted access. When they finish the 6-month plan, they get control. No shortcuts." He set it beside the letters. And for the first time in a long time, we drank our tea in peace. 2 parents, one older, one worn, holding the line between consequence and compassion. I hadn't heard from the hospice center directly since Jack and Marie began volunteering there. Their service hours were part of the restitution terms, and I had left that arrangement strictly supervised by David and the youth housing coordinator. But one Thursday afternoon, I received a call from the director, a soft-voiced woman named Colleen who had never spoken to me before. "Mrs. Harding?" she asked. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," I said. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing wrong. Quite the opposite, actually. I just wanted to speak to you about your grandchildren." I froze. Colleen continued, "Jack's been coming in early. Not just on his scheduled days. We've had several patients ask for him specifically. He reads to them. He brings in books from the thrift store. He said they were ones you used to read to him as a child." My heart caught in my throat. "And Marie," she added, asked if she could help with the memory journal program. "It's something we offer to patients with late-stage illnesses. She transcribes their stories by hand." I swallowed hard. "They didn't tell me." Colleen laughed gently. "They wouldn't. They don't do it for attention. And I wouldn't have called if not for something one of our residents said." I gripped the phone tighter. "She said, that girl, Marie, she listens like she's trying to bring my whole life back to me. Like I matter again." The words landed like a stone in my chest. "I thought you should know," Colleen finished. "They're not just filling hours. They're leaving fingerprints on people's lives." I thanked her, politely, then hung up and sat down at the kitchen table, where the stack of letters still lived. I stared at them for a long time. Later that evening, I sat in the garden alone, wrapped in my shawl as the first stars began to prick through the sky. The roses were nearly bare now, just stems and memory. That's when the gate creaked open. No voices, no footsteps. Just Jack, standing at the edge, holding a small paperback book, The Secret Garden, the one I used to read aloud every spring. "I found it at a resale shop," he said. "Thought maybe you'd like to read it again before the frost hits." I nodded, and this time I let him pass the threshold. Not into the house, but onto the porch. He sat across from me. I opened the first page, and together, in the silence of a fall evening, we began to read. The porch became neutral ground. After Jack's quiet reading visits, Marie started stopping by too, always with gloves, always with a task in mind. Raking, sweeping, mulching. She never entered the house. Never asked to. Until one afternoon, she stood at the foot of the steps and said, "Grandma, can I ask you something personal?" I paused. She never called me that anymore. Not like that. "Go ahead." She hesitated, chewing the inside of her cheek. "When you found out you weren't dying, what was the first thing you felt?" I blinked. "What?" "That day. The real test results. After everything. What did you feel?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked past her at the garden, faded now, brittle stems swaying gently. "Anger," I said. Then relief. Then shame. Shame? I realized I had believed the lie too easily. I thought maybe I wanted to believe it because it gave me an excuse to stop fighting. To rest. Marie sat on the porch steps, careful not to come closer. "I think about that every day," she said. "How you thought you were dying. Because of us. Because I made you believe it." I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to sit in that pain, not to hurt her, but so she'd understand the depth of what she'd done. Finally, she said, "I know it'll take years before we're family again. But if you ever decide to have a birthday party or something like that, could I be invited?" She wasn't asking to come inside. She was asking to belong again. I stared at her, this girl who had led a scheme to rip my life apart, now sitting at my feet, asking not for forgiveness, but a sliver of future. "My birthday is in March," I said. "If you're still showing up by then, and I mean every Sunday, every chore, every promise, you'll get an invitation." She looked up at me. "Really?" "But," I added, "it won't be a celebration. It'll be a test. I'll seat you next to every person you disappointed. And you'll smile and serve cake and prove that you understand what you almost destroyed." She nodded, eyes wet but steady. "Deal." That evening, she and Jack raked the yard in silence. At one point, I saw him bump her shoulder gently. She didn't push back, just smiled faintly and kept working. They weren't who they used to be. Not yet who they should be. But something real was forming in the cracks they'd created. It was the first week of December. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing the rose garden in a soft white hush. I was in the kitchen, stirring oatmeal, when I heard the thud on the porch. A box. No return address. Not from the hospice, not from David. I opened it cautiously. Inside was tissue paper. Beneath it, a framed photo. One I had never seen before. It was a snapshot, grainy, clearly taken on an old disposable camera. In it, Jack and Marie were about 8 and 9 years old. They were crouched in the backyard, laughing as they built a snowman. My late husband, Harold, stood behind them, hands on their shoulders, caught mid-laugh. But what caught me wasn't the image. It was the second item in the box. A journal. Handmade, stitched with thread and filled with thick paper. On the cover was a note taped down. From the Memory Project. Transcribed by Marie Harding. I sat down at the kitchen table and began reading. It was filled with the stories of an elderly woman named Miss Ruth, a patient from the hospice. Stories of her childhood, her marriage, her regrets, her loves. All carefully written, with little notes at the margins. She laughed when she said this. She paused here and looked out the window. Marie had captured not just the woman's words, but her presence. Her voice. Each page felt like it was breathing. Near the end of the journal was a folded sheet. A handwritten letter. Grandma, this was my favorite project. Ruth reminded me of you. She told stories the same way you did, slow, detailed, never rushed. She trusted me with her life, even when she knew I didn't deserve it. I wanted you to have this because I know you think I'm still earning your trust. And you're right. But I wanted you to see who I've become when no one's watching. I'm trying to be someone who listens, who remembers, who values the time left with the people who still believe in second chances. Merry Christmas. Marie. I pressed the journal to my chest. And for the first time since this entire nightmare began, I wept. Not in grief. Not in rage. But in mourning for the time I thought I'd lost forever. And maybe, just maybe, in hope for what still remained. It was mid-January when I got the call. Mrs. Harding, said a warm voice on the other end. This is Lucia from the Oakway Youth Transition Center. I oversee Jack and Marie's case plans. I know who you are, I replied. Has something happened? No, she assured quickly. Nothing bad. Quite the opposite. I wanted to speak with you about their progress. I braced myself. Praise wasn't the currency I'd grown to trust anymore. They've exceeded every goal we set, Lucia continued. All community service hours completed. 0 violations. Consistent employment. They've both begun saving. And they've turned down every early exit opportunity we offered. That surprised me. They were given early release? Twice. Once in September, once last month. They declined both. Said they weren't ready. I sat down. I believe, Lucia said gently, they're ready now. And I want to recommend the next step, family reintegration. I said nothing. You set the bar high, she continued, and they rose to it. Now, we're asking if you're willing to begin the next phase, supervised home visits. Gradual. Structured. With your oversight. I'll think about it, I said. And I did. For days. I walked the halls of my house, touching old photos, replaying old arguments. I sat in the garden, staring at the bare stems and thinking of the laughter that once echoed between them. That weekend, they came for their usual Sunday hour. Jack trimmed back the shrubs. Marie salted the walkway. I watched them from the porch, a thermos of tea in hand, letting the silence do its work. Finally, I said, you'll start home visits in February. Once a week. 2 hours. No rooms upstairs. No guests. And no complaints. They both froze. Marie turned first. Are you serious? I nodded. If you're serious about continuing this path, then we move forward. But make no mistake, this house has rules. If you break one, the door closes again. Jack nodded. We understand. Marie whispered, thank you. But I wasn't doing it for gratitude. I was doing it for legacy. Because if Harold were still here, he'd tell me this. They betrayed your trust. But now they're trying to rebuild it, not with flowers or gifts or charm, but with hard-won choices. And sometimes, that's how the best kind of family is made. The first visit was set for February 3rd. A Saturday. 2 hours. Supervised. They were to arrive on time, follow the house rules, and leave without incident. I spent the morning preparing not food or tea, but boundaries. I locked the upstairs door. Removed the spare keys from the hook. Hid all family documents and valuables. At 1 p.m. Sharp, they arrived. Marie wore a plain gray sweater and jeans. Jack had on his work uniform. He'd come straight from the garage. They stood at the door waiting, not ringing the bell. I opened it after a full minute. You're late. Marie blinked. Only by a minute. And that's all it takes to break a rule, I said coolly. They said nothing, stepping inside with quiet reverence. For the first 30 minutes, it was uneventful. Jack helped me with the utility drawer, cleaning it out, organizing batteries and chargers. Marie wiped down photo frames and rearranged the books on the living room shelves. Then it happened. Jack's phone buzzed. He checked it. My hand froze mid-wipe on the kitchen counter. What did I say about house rules? No phones, he muttered. Sorry. I walked over and held out my hand. He placed the phone in my palm without a word. Marie stiffened. He just looked at the time. I stared her down. He broke the rule. Don't defend it. That's how it starts. Her shoulders dropped. You're right. That moment could have shattered the whole visit. The tension in the room turned hot, like a string pulled too tight. But instead of arguing, they kept working. They finished their tasks. They didn't sulk. At 2:59 p.m., they both stood by the front door with their coats on. Thank you for letting us come, Jack said. Even if we messed up, Marie added. I didn't reply immediately. I looked them both over, older, humbled, more cautious. You made a mistake, I said. But you didn't run from it. I handed Jack his phone back. Next Saturday. Same time. Don't be late. They nodded, then walked out together, closing the door gently behind them. I stood in the silence that followed, expecting to feel tension. Or resentment. Instead, I felt peace. Later that evening, while folding laundry, I found something tucked into the back pocket of the jeans I had given Marie weeks ago for chores. A note. I know we still have a long way to go. But today, being in the house again, even for just 2 hours, it felt like breathing after holding it in for a year. Thank you for not giving up on us. I placed it in the drawer with the others. The stack was growing. And so was my trust. It was a crisp March morning. My 65th birthday. No banners. No guests. Just a small cake I'd baked myself, 3 mugs set on the kitchen table, and the faint scent of daffodils from the vase Marie had left on the porch the day before. At 10 a.m. sharp, they arrived, Jack in his garage jacket, streaked with oil and dust, and Marie in a floral blouse, her hair tucked behind her ears like she used to do when she was a child pretending to be a grown-up. But this time, it wasn't pretend. They waited at the gate. I walked out slowly and opened it myself. You're late, I said flatly. They both flinched. By exactly 0 seconds, I added. Marie smiled. Jack let out a soft breath. I guess some habits are hard to break, I said, then stepped aside. Come in. Not for chores. Not under supervision. But as my grandchildren. They walked the path quietly, reverently, as if the soil itself remembered everything that had passed, and maybe it did. Inside, they helped pour tea, slice the cake, set napkins. No instructions. No complaints. We sat down. It was the first time we'd eaten together at that table in over a year. There were gaps in the conversation at first, moments where someone reached for a memory and stopped short. But gradually, the rhythm returned. We talked about Jack's apprenticeship, now fully underway. About Marie's decision to apply for a scholarship in hospice care studies. About David's growing support, and even Helena's slow, begrudging acceptance. Then Jack reached into his coat and pulled out a small wrapped box. I narrowed my eyes. We said no gifts. This one's not from me, he said. It's from both of us. I opened it. Inside was a key. My spare house key. The one they had once duplicated and used to raid the drawers. The one they hadn't been allowed to touch since that day. It's not for using yet, Marie said softly. It's just symbolic. When you think we've earned it, you can give it back. My hand trembled as I held it. So much had been lost. But so much had also been rebuilt. Not on lies. Not on blind forgiveness. But on accountability, on time, and on the hard, silent labor of redemption. I looked at both of them, my grandchildren, no longer children. You haven't earned it yet, I said gently.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video, like and subscribe. Bye bye!